In a sport where every fraction of a second counts and every shot echoes with purpose, proper fit isn't optional. It's everything. Born from a legacy of British craftsmanship and forged for the modern competitor, this is the Webley Scott Pro Comp. All right, so today we're taking a look at a Webley Scott Pro Comp series. Now, this is a competition over-under shotgun that was designed to really provide a lot of value to shooters at a fraction of the price of its competitors. I had the opportunity to talk to the Midwest sales rep, Matt Battaglia, who basically explained some of the options and features that this gun comes with. So with that said, let's dive into that first. Now, this gun does come in 8 different configurations. You can either get right hand or left hand, mechanical stock or wood stock, or 30-inch or 32-inch barrels. Now, from the factory, it does come in a hard shell plastic case with a custom cut foam insert. It does have 5 extended chokes with it, along with a choke key, and then plenty of spacers and shims, so you can really customize that to your fit. These do only come in 12 gauge, and they are chambered for both 2 3/4 and 3-inch shells. The receiver as well as the barrels are all steel, and they are coated in a matte black Cerakote finish for protection. The stock and the forend are basically Turkish walnut and are coated and finished with a linseed oil. Now, the mechanical stock is a really cool feature because it is super adjustable. I mean, you can change the length of pull on this, you can change the cast, you can change the pitch, you can rotate certain parts. You can also take the weight and move it back and forth, so you can really get this gun balanced to your specific fit. I also really love the glove grip that it has along with the thumb hole, so you can really put your hand in the same spot on that stock every time. And then the checkering is actually machined on this as well. Now, taking a look at the trigger is a single stage selective trigger, and it does also have an adjustable trigger blade. So again, not only can you change the adjustable length of pull, but by changing that blade, you can really customize it to your hand and your finger length, which is also a really nice feature. Now, on top of that, lastly, this gun comes with a 5-year factory warranty, which is really good in the industry. It does cover everything on the gun besides the finish, which is pretty standardized these days. Now, all the servicing and warranties are done right here in Miami, Florida, which is nice that the gun stays in the United States. You don't have to ship it out of the country or anything like that. And it is backed again by that 5-year warranty. So those are some of the options and features that you can get one of these in if you want to get your hands on one. Now let's talk about my first impressions. All right, so today we've got the Webley Scott Pro Comp series with the mechanical stock and the 32-inch barrels. Now, before we get too far into the video, I do want to disclose that I'm not being compensated in any way for this video. We basically got to borrow the gun, we're shooting the gun, and then I'm giving my honest opinion and review on this gun. So now that we got that out of the way, let's kind of go into some of my first impressions. Now, when I first took a look at the gun, I did feel like it was your normal, simple break action over-under shotgun. They decided to go with a matte black Cerakote finish, you know, both on the steel receiver as well as the barrels. No engraving on the receiver or anything fancy like that. In terms of the actual stock and the forend, they decided to go with the Turkish walnut with that linseed oil. And even though that it is a fairly plain finish, I was told that the reason why they did that is so you can continue to adjust this stock to your liking. So you could actually sand it down yourself or take it to a smith and get that stock really customized for your liking. And then to refinish it, you could just basically reapply some linseed oil so it wouldn't look different from the rest of the gun. So those are some of the things there. Now, they did add some blue accents onto the spacers as well as the hinge pin, as well as the band around the chokes, just to add a little bit of pop. But overall, again, this gun's not going to have the high grade wood. It's not going to have the engraving and the hand checkering and some of the embellishments that you're going to get on maybe a Beretta or a Browning or some of the other upper scale guns like Perazzi, Krieghoff, and so on, right? So with that being said, you know, it is very tastefully done, but it's not going to have some of those things. A couple things that I really like about the gun. Starting off, I really like this glove grip stock. I like that it's got that finger groove for my thumb, so every time I grab the gun, I get pretty much the same position every time for consistency. Another thing that I really like, again, is just this adjustable stock. You know, I've got it right at the 15-inch length of pull, which I'm accustomed to. I also do like that the trigger is also, the trigger blade is also adjustable. So I can really get that to fit my hand how I want. It is a little heavy. It's 9 pounds, 13 ounces, which is definitely a little heavy for me. However, at the same time, it definitely absorbs that recoil, so it's a very low recoil shooting gun. On top of that, in terms of the trigger itself, the trigger is a little heavy for a competition gun. We did test this before we came out, and it came at, 6.5 pounds, which is pretty heavy. However, it does have a very clean break. So it's got a little bit of creep, but when you bring it back to that wall, it's a really clean, crisp break that I really like. It just took me a little while to get used to. Now, in terms of sight picture, this one does come with a mid bead and an end bead. The mid bead is actually pretty low, which personally I like because I'm not a huge fan of mid beads, so it was not distracting to me. And then in terms of the end bead, it's a very bright red, high vis bead. So again, you can acquire that target really easily. You see the bead, yet it's not, you know, overbearing or anything like that. So I really did like the sight picture on this gun once I got it to fit to my liking. Now, in terms of quality, it does definitely have a very solid feel and design to it. It is your standard break action. However, I will say that it is a little tight. In terms of closing the breech, you do have to give it a little bit of force to make sure it's completely closed, which again is something that I had to get used to a little bit. But after, you know, putting 150 rounds through it or so, I definitely got used to it pretty quickly. But definitely something to note. Now, it is a newer gun. They came out in 2024. I don't know how many rounds specifically have gone through this gun, but at the same time, I do know typically most break actions are a little tight out of the gates, and maybe it just needs that break-in period. But with that said, you know, those were some of my first impressions on the Pro Comp series. Now let's get into shootability. All right, so after my first couple shots, one of the first things that I noticed is that this gun definitely absorbs recoil. Now, that would be expected on a gun that weighs almost 10 pounds, but it does handle recoil really well. Now, we did put about 150 rounds, give or take, maybe a little more than that, through this gun on 2 different occasions when we took it out. And with that, we were using Federal target loads, 8-shot, and we had a modified choke in the upper and an improved cylinder choke in the lower. And we actually did really well with it. It definitely breaks clays. First time around, I shot a 39. Keep in mind though, I was kind of getting used to the gun, adjusting it to me. Second time around, I shot a 42. And then the third time around, I shot a 43. Now, my average in sporting clays is about a 42. So pretty much hit average with this gun. And keep in mind, I'm used to shooting a Satori, which is 8 pounds, 1 ounce. And 30-inch barrels. So this was definitely a change for me. However, I really did like it. And once I got used to that trigger, I was actually shooting pretty consistently with it, with those loads. Now, we did take it to the patterning board as well. And we noticed that it was patterning right around 60-40, 50-50. So I would say that it was probably more on the 60-40 edge of how we had it configured, but not, you know, sharply 60-40, if that makes sense. Now, I typically like shooting a little bit of a 50-50. So for me, again, at 60-40, a little out of my comfort zone, but overall it shot really well for us. Now, a couple things that I really liked about the gun, again, is that stock. I noticed that my hand was in the same place every time. My sight picture was the same every time once I got it comfortable for me. And with that mechanical stock, you do have the option to also balance it out with the weight. However, what I didn't like about the gun is that with that 100-gram weight, we noticed after the first 20, 30 shots that that recoil was actually moving that weight forward. So we felt that, you know, with this gun, it would have made more sense for an engineering design to, rather than have like a free floating rail system, to actually put notches in there, multiple notches, so you can still adjust that weight and put it exactly where you want on the stock, but then it'd be in a configuration where it wouldn't be able to move. And in terms of like competitions where you're shooting this, you know, all day long or even for a weekend, you do want to know that that weight is not going to move, so you're consistent. So that was definitely something that maybe we would have done differently with this gun. Another thing that I noticed and that I mentioned earlier is that it was very tight. You really had to put some force into it to lock this gun up. And again, it might just be the break-in period that's needed, but consistently throughout all 3 rounds, I did notice that I was having to put that extra force into this gun. So those are some of my impressions right out of the gates in terms of shootability. But again, you know, I was hitting my average scores after only about 50 rounds into it, which is pretty good for me, especially because it was a little bit different than what I'm used to. And again, the stock alone is really the highlight and the showcase of this gun, and that made it all worth the while, and it made me want to shoot it even more because of the adjustability, because I kept on asking myself, maybe if I adjusted this, maybe if I adjusted that, I could even get better with it. And it was a really good shooter overall. So now we talked a little about shooting. Now I want to go into my final thoughts on the Pro Comp series. All right, so let's wrap up the video talking about my final thoughts and how this gun stacks up against other competition shotguns in its class. Now, I can say that the Webley Scott Pro Comp series definitely is a great value for its features and its price. Considering that you're paying about a third of what you'd pay for a Beretta Pro 694 with a TSK stock or a Browning 725 with a TSK stock, you are getting a whole lot of gun with a whole lot of customization and adjustability for, again, a great price, probably about a third of what you pay for some of those other competition shotguns. Now, what I will say is that where you are sacrificing a little bit with this gun is the grade and the finish. You're not getting the engraving, you're not getting the high quality wood with the handcrafted checkering. A lot of those enhancements and embellishments are just not going to be found on this gun. Now, in terms of functionality, we had no issues with this gun, and again, I really like this mechanical stock. So if you're taking a look at the price point on this gun and looking at its competitors, one of the big highlights on this is that if you're looking at the gun with the mechanical stock, the glove grip, and the 32-inch barrels, this is a great value and you get a lot of gun for that price. However, if you're looking at the wood stock with the adjustable comb, and personally, I do feel like there's a lot of other competitors out there at a similar price that you could look at, like the Weatherby Orion, even some of the Berettas and the Brownings are at much lower price points. However, this mechanical stock really is what sold it for me. If you are looking for a competition shotgun at a very, very affordable price with a lot of those customization and adjustability features with a very heavy, durable, solid feeling gun, this is a great option for you. Now, let me ask you guys, do you have one of these guns? What has your experience been like with it? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Tell us down in the comments, because not only does it help me, but also helps other viewers. Another thing that I also want to mention is that we only put about 150 rounds through this gun. So a true testament would be is how does this hold up after tens of thousands of rounds and years of use? Now, we definitely would like to thank Webley Scott as well as Matt Battaglia for letting us borrow this gun to do this review today. We had a lot of fun with it, and again, it is a great value for what you're all getting in terms of the features and the options, and it ran really, really well for us. So with that being said, as always, we love getting our hands on these guns. We love doing the reviews, taking the video, and sharing it with all of you guys. We definitely appreciate all of your support, so please continue to like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you can get notifications on all of our future content. So with that being said, this is Scott signing off with The Average Joe's Armory, channel for the Average Joe, and I'll see you in the next one.